The sun dipped low over the rolling hills of Ogwele, casting golden hues across the thatched rooftops and sprawling farmland. The village, nestled in the embrace of lush forests, stood still, as if the weight of its struggles had quieted even the hum of nature. Life here was simple, yet every action, every decision, carried the echoes of ancestral wisdom. The air, heavy with the scent of dry earth, mirrored the anxious hearts of the villagers. For 3 seasons, the rains had not come. The once abundant fields now stretched barren, their cracked soil a testament to the famine that gripped the land. Families rationed their meager stores, and cattle, once the pride of Ogwele, grew gaunt and restless. Whispers filled the air, murmurs of desperation and unanswered prayers. At the edge of the village stood the ancient baobab tree, its gnarled branches stretching skyward like a silent sentinel. Beneath its shadow lay the sealed well, a place both revered and feared. The well had been covered long ago, its stones piled high under the stern watch of the eldest circle. The stories were as old as the tree itself, a warning against disturbing the ancestors' peace. It was said that to uncover the well was to invite their wrath, a curse that would bring ruin upon the village. Elderly women recounted these tales to wide-eyed children, their voices trembling as they spoke of glowing apparitions and voices that echoed in the night. But now, as the famine deepened, even the most devout began to wonder if the well held more than just legends. The village needed a miracle, or someone brave enough to challenge its traditions. In the heart of Ogwele, Amahle sat by the cooking fire, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. The eldest daughter of her family, she had grown up challenging the expectations placed on her. Where others saw boundaries, Amahle saw opportunities. Her hands were calloused from days spent laboring in the fields, yet her spirit was unyielding. "We cannot wait for the rains," she said firmly to her mother, who stirred a thin pot of porridge. "The land cries for water, and the people grow weaker each day. Something must be done." Her mother glanced at her with a mix of pride and worry. "Amahle, you speak boldly, but the elders cling to fear," Amahle interrupted, her voice rising. "They speak of curses, while we starve. The well could save us." Her younger brother, Tariq, sat nearby, listening intently. At just 11, his curiosity often led him into trouble, but he adored Amahle. She was a beacon of courage, a force against the hopelessness that hung over the village like a dark cloud. "Do you think the well still has water?" Tariq asked, his eyes wide with wonder. Amahle hesitated, her resolve briefly flickering. "I don't know," she admitted, "but it's time someone found out." That evening, as the village prepared for the night, Tariq wandered toward the baobab tree. The stories of the well intrigued him, but more than that, he wanted to prove himself useful to his sister. The tree's twisted roots jutted from the air, ground like ancient fingers, and the stone pile that sealed the well stood in stark contrast to the surrounding landscape. Tariq knelt beside the stones, running his fingers over the cracks between them. A small spark of mischief lit his face as he pressed against one of the smaller stones. It shifted slightly. He pushed harder, and with a sudden lurch, the stone tumbled free, crashing into the darkness below. A faint glow seeped from the opening, bathing Tariq's face in a pale, unearthly light. His breath caught. The tales were true. There was something in the well, something alive. His heart pounded as he scrambled to his feet, the weight of what he'd done dawning on him. "Amahle," he shouted, sprinting back toward the village. "Amahle, you have to see this." Amahle was tending to the fire when Tariq burst into the yard, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "The well? It's glowing. I moved one of the stones, and there's light coming from inside. She froze, her heart racing. The elders' warnings echoed in her mind, but so did the cries of hungry children and the desperate faces of the villagers. If there was even a chance that the well held water or answers, it was worth the risk. "Tariq," she said firmly, gripping his shoulders. "You shouldn't have gone near the well, but if what you say is true, we cannot ignore it." Her mother, overhearing the exchange, gasped. "Amahle, no, the well is cursed. You know what the elders say." Amahle stood tall, her resolve hardening. "And what have the elders done to save us? We cannot survive on fear." She turned to Tariq, her voice softening. "Show me." The siblings crept through the village, under the cover of night, careful to avoid the watchful eyes of the elders. As they reached the baobab tree, the faint glow from the well became visible, spilling through the cracks in the stones like moonlight on water. Amahle knelt by the well, her hands trembling as she touched the cold stones. The light seemed to pulse, as if alive. She glanced at Tariq, whose face was a mixture of excitement and fear. "This could be our chance," Amahle murmured, more to herself than to her brother. "But we must be careful." The weight of the moment pressed down on her. If the well truly held a curse, her actions could doom the village. But if it held the answer to their prayers, she could save them all. With a deep breath, she whispered, "Ancestors, guide me." Under the blanket of a moonless sky, Amahle stood at the edge of the village, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. Beside her, Tariq, wide-eyed and eager, carried a small oil lantern. 3 other villagers, young, restless, and equally desperate for answers, huddled close. The glow from the lantern danced across their faces, casting shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. "We must move quickly," Amahle whispered, her voice low but firm. "The elders cannot know what we're about to do. If they catch us..." She trailed off, her words heavy with unspoken consequences. One of the boys, Kofi, glanced nervously toward the village. "Amahle, are you sure about this? The well..." "What? If the stories are true..." Amahle's gaze hardened. "And what if they aren't? Look around you, Kofi. The crops are dead, the cattle are dying, and our people are starving. If the well holds even the faintest hope, we must take that chance." Reluctantly, Kofi nodded, and the group crept toward the ancient baobab tree, its twisted branches silhouetted against the starless sky. The journey felt like a pilgrimage. Each step weighted with the weight of tradition and the silent judgment of unseen ancestors. When they reached the well, Amahle motioned for them to stop. The faint glow that Tariq had described earlier seeped through the cracks in the stone covering. It was both mesmerizing and ominous, like the heartbeat of something ancient and alive. "Help me move the stones," Amahle instructed. Her voice, though steady, carried an undercurrent of unease. Together, they worked in silence, their breaths shallow as they lifted and pushed the heavy stones aside. The glow intensified, illuminating the gnarled roots of the baobab tree and the beads of sweat forming on their foreheads. Finally, the last stone was removed, revealing a dark, yawning mouth that seemed to pull at the air around it. As they lowered the ropes into the well, the group hesitated. "Amahle," one of the girls, Zola, whispered, clutching at Amahle's arm. "What if we don't come back?" Amahle placed a reassuring hand on Zola's. "We are not doing this for ourselves," she said softly. "We are doing this for Ogwele. Trust the ancestors to guide our steps." With that, Amahle took the lead, gripping the rope tightly as she descended into the forbidden depths. The walls of the well were damp and cold, and the faint glow grew brighter the farther they went. Strange markings began to appear on the stone. their shapes shifting and swirling as if alive. "What is this place?" Tariq whispered from above, his voice barely audible. "I don't know," Amahle replied, her breath hitching as her feet touched solid ground. The cavern that opened before them was unlike anything she had imagined. The walls pulsed with light, casting ethereal patterns across the floor. At the center of the cavern lay a single object, a calabash, intricately carved and shimmering with an otherworldly glow. The group stared in awe, their fear momentarily forgotten. The calabash seemed to hum softly, its energy palpable. Amahle approached it cautiously, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. "What do we do now?" Kofi asked, his voice trembling. Amahle knelt beside the calabash, her fingers hovering just above its surface. "We take it," she said, her voice steady but low. "Whatever power this holds, it was meant to be found." "But the stories," Zola began. But Amahle silenced her with a look. "The stories were meant to keep us from the truth," Amahle said. "If we leave this here, Ogwele will perish. I won't let that happen." She reached out and touched the calabash. The moment her fingers made contact, the markings on the walls flared to life, bathing the cavern in blinding light. The group shielded their eyes, their hearts pounding as the hum grew louder, almost deafening. Above ground, the villagers stirred in their homes as the earth beneath Ogwele trembled. Chief Ekwemi, seated by his fire, felt the shift in the air and frowned. "The well," he muttered, his voice heavy with dread. "Something has been disturbed." Back in the cavern, Amahle cradled the calabash in her hands, its glow pulsating like a heartbeat. As the light began to fade, visions filled the air around them, figures of their ancestors, their faces solemn, and their eyes glowing with wisdom and warning. Amahle, one of the figures, intoned, its voice echoing in the cavern. "You have awakened what was long hidden. The power you now hold is not without cost." Amahle swallowed hard, her courage wavering. "I only wish to save my village," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Then, you must act with wisdom," the ancestor replied. "The calabash holds great power, but it demands unity and sacrifice. Use it wisely, or it will bring ruin." The visions faded as quickly as they had appeared, leaving the group in silence. Amahle looked at the calabash in her hands, its glow now softer, almost soothing. "We need to leave," she said, her voice firm. Now, as they ascended back to the surface, the faint glow of dawn touched the horizon. The well behind them seemed to sigh, as if relieved to be unburdened of its secret. But in Amahle's heart, a storm was brewing, one that would soon engulf the entire village. The village gathered under the ancient baobab tree, its gnarled branches stretching out like the arms of the ancestors themselves. The air was heavy, with tension, thick with the scent of earth and smoke from the elders' torches. Amahle stood at the center of the circle, clutching the calabash close to her chest. Its faint glow lit her face, casting an ethereal shadow that flickered like a restless spirit. Chief Ekweme stepped forward, his staff of authority thudding against the hard ground. His deep voice broke the silence. "Amahle," he began, his tone firm yet weary. "The well was sealed to protect us. You defied our sacred laws. Now, you and your companions must return what was taken and beg the ancestors for mercy." The villagers murmured among themselves, their faces a mixture of fear, awe, and uncertainty. The calabash had brought rain to their parched fields and water to their dried rivers, but it had also stirred something unseen, something dangerous. Amahle raised her head, meeting the chief's gaze. "We disturbed the well not out of rebellion, but out of desperation. If returning this calabash is what the ancestors demand, then I will do so. But know this, our survival must come from courage, not fear. The elders exchanged glances, but said nothing. The circle tightened as the chants of the villagers rose in a low hum, their voices trembling with both hope and dread. As the night deepened, Amahle sat alone, the calabash resting on her lap. She stared at its intricate carvings, her fingers tracing the symbols that seemed to shift under her touch. In the flickering firelight, she saw fleeting images. Her brother Tariq, smiling as he played by the river. The elders gathered under the baobab tree. The faces of villagers, gaunt and weary, searching for hope. Her mother approached quietly, her hands clasped tightly. "You carry a heavy burden, my child," she said, her voice soft, yet laden with worry. Amahle didn't look up. "The ancestors showed me what this calabash holds. Power, knowledge, but also destruction if we fail to respect it." Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder. "The ancestors chose you for a reason. Trust in them and trust in yourself." Taking a deep breath, Amahle nodded. "I will not fail them, or Ogwele." The ritual began under the pale light of the moon. The villagers gathered around, their voices raised in solemn chants. Amahle stood at the edge of the well, the calabash glowing brighter with each passing moment. Beside her, Nokuthula watched, her eyes glinting with something more than reverence, envy. As the chants grew louder, Nokuthula's resolve hardened. This power should not belong to Amahle, she thought, her heart pounding with jealousy. She does not deserve to be the hero. When no one was watching, Nokuthula crept closer to the sacred circle, her hands trembling as she reached for the calabash. She could feel its energy even before touching it, a pulse of warmth and light that seemed to call to her. But the moment her fingers brushed the calabash, the world around her erupted. The markings on the calabash flared, and a deafening roar filled the air. The ground beneath the villagers' feet began to quake, sending people scrambling for balance. "What have you done?" Amahle shouted, clutching the calabash tightly, as Nokuthula stumbled back in fear. The sky above Ogwele turned black, and fierce winds howled through the village. Glowing figures appeared in the storm, ancestral spirits, their faces both sorrowful and angry. The villagers screamed, seeking shelter, but the spirits seemed to be everywhere at once. Nokuthula fell to her knees, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for this to happen. Amahle turned to her, her voice rising above the chaos. "This storm will destroy us all unless we restore balance. You must help me return the calabash to the well." Amahle clutched the calabash. As the winds whipped around her, the ancestors' voices seemed to call her name, guiding her toward the well. Each step felt heavier than the last, but her resolve burned brighter than ever. "This is my path," she whispered. "This is what I must do." As she reached the edge of the well, a vision appeared before her, a shimmering figure of her grandmother, who had passed long ago. "Amahle," the spirit said, her voice calm amidst the storm. "The calabash was never meant to divide or destroy. Its power comes from unity, from selflessness. Do you understand?" Tears streamed down Amahle's face as she nodded. "I do." The spirit smiled, then faded into the light. Taking a deep breath, Amahle descended into the well, the calabash glowing brighter with each step. The markings on the walls seemed to guide her, their light forming a path deeper into the earth. At the bottom of the well, the cavern pulsed with energy. Amahle knelt, holding the calabash high. "Ancestors," she said, her voice steady, "I return this gift to its rightful place. Forgive us for our arrogance, and teach us to honor your wisdom." As she placed the calabash on the altar, the storm above began to subside. The winds calmed, and the spirit's cries softened into a gentle hum. A warm golden light filled the cavern, and Amahle felt a deep sense of peace wash over her. When Amahle emerged from the well, the village was silent. The storm had passed, and the air was still. The villagers gathered around her, their faces filled with awe and gratitude. From the crowd, Nokuthula stepped forward, her eyes red with tears. "Amahle," she said, her voice breaking, I was wrong. My jealousy blinded me, and I endangered us all. Please forgive me." Amahle placed a hand on Nokuthula's shoulder. "The ancestors have shown us the path forward. We cannot dwell on the mistakes of the past. Together, we will rebuild." Chief Ekweme stepped forward, his staff held high. "Amahle," he said, his voice filled with respect. "You have shown us the true meaning of courage and unity. Ogwele owes you its life." The villagers cheered, their voices rising in celebration. As they gathered around the well, its waters flowed freely, a symbol of renewal and hope. Above them, the ancestors' voices echoed softly, a blessing carried on the wind. Prosperity is born from unity, and unity from selflessness. Honor this truth, and you will thrive. Amahle stood among her people, a quiet smile on her face. She had found her purpose, and Ogwele had found its way forward. The rains came as if summoned by the ancestors themselves, their steady rhythm echoing through the hills of Ogwele. The once cracked earth drank deeply, and the villagers stood in awe, letting the droplets wash over their faces and hands. Children danced in the puddles, their laughter rising above the gentle roar of the downpour, while elders muttered prayers of thanks, their voices trembling with emotion. By the next morning, the fields that had lain barren for 3 long seasons began to show signs of life. Tiny green shoots broke through the soil, a symbol of hope that spread through the village like a wildfire. The rivers swelled with fresh water, their currents carrying away the memories of despair. Ogwele was alive again. At the heart of it all was the well, now flowing freely with clear, sparkling water. Villagers gathered around it, their once fearful whispers replaced with songs of celebration. "This well," an elder said, his voice cracking with emotion, "is no longer a curse. It is the lifeblood of Ogwele, a gift from the ancestors." The villagers nodded in agreement, their hearts swelling with gratitude. What had once been a source of dread had become a beacon of unity. As the celebrations continued, Amahle stood quietly on the outskirts of the crowd, her hands folded in front of her. She watched as families filled clay pots with water, their faces lit with joy. The calabash, now returned to its rightful place, was no longer glowing, but its power was felt in every breath of the rejuvenated land. "Come, Amahle," Chief Ekweme called, motioning for her to join him in the center of the gathering. The crowd fell silent as she approached, their eyes filled with admiration. "You are a hero," the chief said, his voice steady but warm. "Through your courage and sacrifice, you have brought life back to Ogwele." Amahle shook her head humbly. "I am no hero, Chief. The ancestors guided my steps, and it is through the strength of our community that we stand here today." Ekweme nodded, his face softening. "Then let this moment remind us all that tradition and progress must walk hand in hand. Fear of the past must not blind us to the future." The villagers erupted into cheers, their voices echoing through the hills. Amahle smiled softly, her heart swelling with pride, not for herself, but for her people. Later that evening, Nokuthula stood before the village, her head bowed in shame. "Amahle," she began, her voice trembling, "and all of Ogwele, I have wronged you. My envy blinded me, and my actions endangered us all. I do not ask for forgiveness, for I know I do not deserve it, but I promise to dedicate my life to serving this community, however I can. Amahle stepped forward, placing a hand on Nokuthula's shoulder. The ancestors have taught us that redemption comes not from words, but from actions. Let your heart guide you, and let your hands work for the good of Ogwele. Nokuthula nodded, tears streaming down her face. From that day on, she threw herself into rebuilding the village, helping repair homes and tending to the fields. Slowly but surely, her actions began to heal the wounds she had caused. In the days that followed, Tariq's health improved. As the village thrived, so did he, his youthful energy returning in full force. One morning, he approached the elders' circle, his head held high. "I wish to learn," he said simply. "I want to honor the ancestors and carry their wisdom forward." The elders smiled, their faces glowing with pride. "You are young," one of them said, "but your heart is strong. Sit with us, Tariq, and let us teach you the stories of our people." Amahle watched from a distance, her heart swelling with pride. Her brother had always been mischievous, but now she saw the makings of a leader in his bright eyes. As the seasons passed, the village began to flourish once more. The rifts that had divided the people were mended, and a spirit of collaboration replaced the fear and jealousy that had once plagued Ogwele. Families worked side by side in the fields, and the laughter of children filled the air. The well, now regarded as sacred, became a gathering place for the community. Elders told stories around it in the evenings, their words weaving the lessons of the past with the hope of the future. It stood as a testament to the power of unity and selflessness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Amahle sat by the well, her reflection shimmering in its clear waters. Chief Ekwemi joined her, his staff tapping gently against the ground. "The ancestors have blessed us," he said, his voice thoughtful. "But they have also taught us a great lesson." Amahle nodded. "That true prosperity comes not from ambition or power, but from unity and sacrifice." The chief smiled, "and that the wisdom of the past must guide the steps of the present." "Ogwele has found its balance, Amahle, thanks to you." She shook her head. "Not thanks to me, Chief. Thanks to all of us." Above them, the stars began to appear, twinkling like the eyes of the ancestors. The well's waters glistened in the fading light, a symbol of the village's resilience and the harmony they had achieved. Ogwele would thrive for generations to come, its people united by the lessons of the past and the promise of the future.